Absolutely, I understand why officers are upset. If you look at it from Darren Wilson's testimony, Mike Brown attempted to take his gun away, and the only reason you take a police officer's gun away is to kill him. So in most officers' minds, who are now aware of that forensic evidence inside the vehicle, which supports Officer Wilson's story, the photographs of his face, which support his story, I can understand why officers are upset, because in their mind, what we've got is a situation where individual tried to murder a police officer, and the Rams players are showing support. Flip side of the coin, I'm basically a First Amendment absolutist in a situation like this, and I do understand that corporations have rules, so on and so forth, but I personally have absolutely no problem with people expressing their opinions, and these gentlemen expressed their opinion. I happen to think it's foolhardy, because at this point all the forensic evidence indicates that it wasn't Mr. Brown with his hands up standing still. All the evidence indicates that he was coming back at Officer Wilson. Yeah. Now, whether that justifies the use of deadly force, we don't know. And there still are questions about that, but I think it's unfortunate that people are getting behind the hands up, don't shoot, as opposed to, we have grave concerns about the way that policing operates in the United States, and there's a lot of common ground about that, and there are areas where police and members of communities can come together to try to reform some things and make things better. And that's what I think we should work for.
You touched on, David, the reason that many are surprised that there was no disciplinary action taken, because basically what you're saying is that the forensic evidence that came out of this grand jury, out of all of the information that was released, the evidence is refuting the hands up, that he had his hands up. So the question is, this hands up rallying cry, is it a false narrative that people are using to fit their own agenda? That's the question. Ben?
Well, I think, in my opinion, yes. But once again, the issue is people have an absolute right to express that opinion. And I think the issue here is one of what can a corporation do to restrict expression. And if I'm the president of a corporation, I say, look, as long as you don't do something illegal, as long as you don't do something that harms our image, you have an absolute right to express your opinion. Yeah. And so that's just my personal opinion.
I want Ben to...
I don't have a problem with it.
I want Ben to weigh in. Go ahead, Ben.
Well, I definitely think that this is, the hands up, don't shoot has kind of become a mantra, and some people may be joining it for the wrong reasons. My hope is that there's conversations that are had in the locker rooms, there's conversations that are had in the workplace, where people can be honest about their feelings, honest about the fact that they were angry, honest about the fact that they're fearful of police. For policemen to be honest about the fact that they may be fearful when they come into a certain situation, not understanding what's going to happen. The only way things will change and things will get better is if people are able to be honest without feeling like they're going to be offended or they're going to offend someone else.
Again, I want to ask this because maybe, I neglected to. But Ben, do you think the team should have apologized?
Do I think the team should apologize?
Should have apologized to the police department.
I understand why they apologized. I don't think there was a need for an apology, honestly. They were exercising their First Amendment rights, the players were. But when it comes to something like this, something that's as deeply rooted as the events that happened in Ferguson, being that they are in St. Louis and that they do business with those who are on both sides of the coin, I think it was an appropriate action, and I can understand why they apologized. I, however, don't believe and don't expect those players to face any disciplinary action.
Do you think people are hearing what they want to hear and believing what they want to believe in this particular case? We talk about the forensics. People, the forensics that's all been played out, that's been shown. The grand jury has come to a conclusion. And then on the other side, there are people who believe that the officer was attacked and should not have been indicted. And regardless of what you say, what the evidence shows, people are going to believe what they want to believe. Do you believe that, Benjamin?
I think there are some people that are going to believe, no matter what they want to believe. I also believe that many of us, myself included, come into certain situations already looking for evidence to support what we believe. Mm-hmm. Not really looking for the truth, but looking for something to support what we already believe and the preconceived notions that we already have. And that's what I dealt with. That's why I kind of wrote to myself and kind of getting my feelings out there, because I have a lot of those preconceived notions, and they aren't right. Yeah. We should come into these things with an open mind and kind of look at the evidence and understand that we could be in that similar situation, and we have the same propensity to be evil because of the sin that we all deal with.